And we are coming on the air tonight with another bombshell in the presidential race. Although this one had been telegraphed for a few days now. The top third-party candidate now effectively out of the race, with RFK Jr. suspending his slim path to the presidency. Now here's the twist. He's all in on Trump. Why the independent candidate says Donald Trump is the one that he wants to win. Also tonight, a massive moment on Wall Street after a new announcement from the Fed that could bring relief to millions of Americans. Why the head of the country's central bank says the time has come right now for interest rate relief. Then, do you feel your rent is getting a little bit out of control? A new federal lawsuit says an algorithm might explain why. Shocking allegations against the software maker that your landlord might actually be using. Plus, police tonight on the hunt for a man who escaped from a migrant detention center in Florida. Why law enforcement says he is definitely dangerous. And a Boston woman accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend will face a new trial. We'll tell you why a judge blocked her attempt to throw out the case later in the show. Hi, I'm Sam Brock in for Hallie tonight from New York, and we are starting with that huge shakeup in the 2024 presidential race. Independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he's taken his name off the ballot in battleground states and endorsing former President Trump. Now, you see RFK right here in just the last couple of hours calling it quits out in Arizona. Kennedy claims that he would have won the election in what he calls a fair system, but he criticized the Democratic Party, criticized the media, and describes this decision as the best path forward for his supporters.
I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do.
Agonizing, but it's what he's doing. Kennedy says he is pulling his name off the ballot in 10 battleground states, including Arizona, where he will be appearing at a rally tonight. Now, just this week, RFK got enough signatures to get onto Arizona's ballots. Now he says, thanks, I'm good, take me off. And we have huge questions, many of them tonight, about what this might mean with only 74 days left until the final opportunity to make your voice heard in this election. As in, will this give former President Trump a boost in the swing states, where he's starting to fall behind Vice President Kamala Harris, who we're going to talk about in a second? Will he deploy RFK on the campaign trail? And how will RFK's voters react to this decision? Is it a given they're just going to go right to Donald Trump? David Noriega is in Las Vegas, where Mr. Trump was earlier today. David, thank you for joining us. And, you know, what we're learning right now about this back-channel efforting between RFK Jr. and the former president, what can you tell us?
That's right, Sam. So we have gotten some details from NBC News has gotten some details from people familiar with these negotiations. Apparently, Donald Trump Jr. has been working behind the scenes for about 6 months to get RFK to drop out and endorse his father, Donald Trump. We know also that Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host, helped facilitate the connections between RFK Jr. and Don Jr. and the Trump campaign. Now, this news broke just a few minutes before Trump made an appearance here in Las Vegas at an event promoting his policy on eliminating federal taxes on tips, and he was asked to respond to the news. And take a listen to what he said.
I want to thank Bobby. That was very nice. That was really very nice. That's big. He's a great guy, respected by everybody.
I should say, Sam, our Jillian Frankel was also able to ask him whether there was any intention of giving RFK Jr. any kind of cabinet position in exchange for this endorsement. He sort of avoided the question. He did not answer that question. So that's something that we're still definitely looking out for. Sam?
Yeah, and also fascinating to learn this was a months-long, not a weeks-long effort, David. You know, I'd also talk about the recent polling here because our Mark Murray does show us that RFK has been taking more voters away from Trump than Harris. If you can, dive into the numbers for us here. Does the reverse also hold true, that now former President Trump could pull back those same voters that didn't want to vote for him in the first place?
Yeah, that is the hope for the Trump campaign, and probably at this point for RFK Jr. and his camp as well. Look, for a while, RFK's impact on the numbers was a little bit unclear. But then Biden dropping out of the race and Kamala Harris replacing him at the top of the ticket made that much clearer, because as part of Kamala Harris's rise in the polls, that was accompanied by a drop in RFK's numbers in the polls. They went down from about 9% to about 4% where they are now. So that indicates that some of those people who were thinking about voting for RFK instead of Biden instead made the decision to hop over to Harris. Now, the question is exactly as you said. Will the opposite happen? Will those RFK voters go to Trump? I think it's going to be hard to answer that question unless we get some more detailed polling, particularly in swing states like Nevada, where I am now, and Arizona, where both Trump and RFK Jr. are today. And, you know, obviously until November itself, we're not really going to know the answer to that question. Sam?
David, so it stands to reason this could have a significant impact around the margins. It may not. I guess we're going to have to wait to find out. Thank you so much for that reporting. We do have a live shot right now from Glendale, Arizona, which in just a matter of hours is where President Trump is going to be addressing voters there. We're going to be bringing you, of course, the very latest, especially on the heels of RFK suspending his candidacy. All right, let's go now to Vice President Kamala Harris, who right now is on her way back to D.C. from Chicago. You're about to see her leaving. And our Peter Alexander, late last night, getting the exclusive reaction of Harris, riding that high from her Democratic National Convention speech. Here's her response in the aftermath.
Listen, we've got 75 days to go, so maybe for better and for worse, that's the way I am. Like, that was good, now we got to move on.
Yeah, we got to move on, and that's going to have to happen fast because, as we mentioned, only 2.5 months here is all that's left between now and the election. And the pressure is certainly tightening to turn those good vibes into votes. A half dozen battleground states all falling within the margin of error, and the stretch run for the race quickly approaching. Gabe Gutierrez is at the White House for us tonight. And Gabe, thank you for joining us. Let's pick right up there on this RFK conversation. In the last hour, we've received, we understand, a statement from the Harris-Walz campaign on his support for the former president. What are they saying?
You know, Sam, this tracks with what we've been hearing over the last several days, where the Harris campaign is really making a renewed push, an urgent effort to get independent swing voters or anyone that might be considering a third-party candidate. Well, we're just getting that statement from the Harris-Walz campaign. Let's put it up on the screen so we can read from it. It says, quote, "For any American out there who is tired of Donald Trump and looking for a new way forward, ours is a campaign for you. In order to deliver for working people and those who feel left behind, we need a leader who will fight for you, not just for themselves, and bring us together, not tear us apart." We received another statement from the DNC, and the DNC senior advisor basically said, good riddance, Sam.
Well, there you go. So you have Harris and Walz making their official pitch then to independents in the wake of this decision. You know, Gabe, our team is also getting new details about what the next couple of weeks are going to look like for the Harris-Walz campaign. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, that's right, Sam. Look, it was a whirlwind week in Chicago. You just mentioned Vice President Harris is on her way back to D.C. after leaving Chicago just a short time ago. Well, we don't expect any public events from the ticket this weekend. As for next week, two sources familiar with the planning tell us that it's possible there could be a potential stop in Georgia, and we're looking for any other potential stops as well. In terms of more travel, it's also expected to pick up around Labor Day, which is traditionally the time for the kickoff that final stretch right before the home stretch of the campaign. Something else we're watching out for, Sam, it's possible that next week we could see a joint interview with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. The Vice President had previously said that she expected to do one before the end of the month. Sam. Yeah,
plenty of calls for that to happen. We'll see how soon it actually comes. Gabe, thank you so much from the White House tonight. Well, just before we came on the air, Wall Street showing that it's feeling pretty good as the Fed chair says that the time has come, that's a direct quote, to cut interest rates. Here's Jerome Powell at the Fed's annual August summit. It's in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, earlier today.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Okay, that's the fancy economic speak. That, of course, is the news that economists and investors have been waiting for, a drop in interest rates for a while now. And tonight, you look at how the markets are reacting. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ all up at least a percentage point. So those indices all responding well. Now, remember, the Fed had been raising interest rates for months, starting in the spring of 2022. They raised rates to a level that had not been seen in almost 2 decades. The goal, by making it more expensive to borrow money, they were hoping that people would spend less and that inflation would cool down. And for the most part, that has actually come into fruition. Brian Chung joining me now to break this all down. And Brian, obviously, that speech that Powell gave today, really his strongest remarks about things turning a corner economically, but it also suggests that the labor market right now has cooled off too.
Yeah, and this is the challenge, right? You're basically walking a tightrope, and inflation was really high. It was like 9% in the summer of 2022, and it's come down precipitously since then, 2.9% as of the last read covering the month of July. That's pretty solid work there. But the question is, okay, yeah, that was a byproduct of the Federal Reserve making interest rates so high, taking steam out of this economy, which makes activity go down. Inflation comes down. But the question is whether or not unemployment is going to go up now. Because if you have high borrowing costs, at what point do businesses say, you know what, am I going to have to start to lay people off? That's a big question. Again, that's why the Federal Reserve is saying, you know what, maybe we can ease up on interest rates to make sure people don't lose their jobs.
And to be fair, unemployment was historically low there for a period of time.
It's still
it
relatively
wasn't sustainable forever.
Exactly.
But I would ask from the consumer standpoint, now people are going to hear this. Okay, now we're talking about a quarter point, maybe a half a point percentage drop. I guess we'll find out. What would that depend upon? And then what would the lag time be once they change the Fed funds rate to consumers actually feeling the effects of it?
Yeah, and just to take a quick step back here, I mean, I speak fluent Fed, okay? And it's very rare that you hear a Fed speaker say the time has come. Like, he's saying it directly, we're going to cut interest rates. But to your point, Sam, we don't know the scale and size of that interest rate cut. It could be a quarter of a percentage point. It could be half a percentage point. It's really going to determine or be determined by some new economic data that we're going to get between now and their next meeting, which is scheduled for September 18th. We're going to get one more jobs report, and we're going to get another inflation report. There's going to be very key for determining, all right, what's the size of the cut when it does happen, likely next month.
What is the net impact for someone who, say, wants to buy a home or refinance a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking at a half percentage point cut, what does that mean for those buyers?
Yeah, and by the way, mortgage rates have already come down on the expectation that the Fed is going to cut interest rates. So we've seen almost a full percentage point of a decline just since May in terms of the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, somewhere around 6.5% right now. So home buyers are already benefiting from this. But look, this is going to be big for credit cards as well as auto loan rates, which are a little bit more hinged to immediate Fed policy. That could be a big change come September if they do cut.
Thank you. And for the record, I would never doubt someone in a suit that sharp doesn't speak fluent Fed.
Sir, thank you very much.
Never a doubt in the world. Brian Chung.
Yep.
Thank you, my friend. Well, there is new fallout tonight from last month's assassination attempt on former President Trump. NBC News learning that some Secret Service officials have been put on leave for their actions leading up to and after that day. This, according to a source familiar with the decisions, who adds that the special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh field office is among those on leave. His office was responsible for coordinating the security plan leading up to Mr. Trump's rally. We still don't know, though, the exact number of officials on leave, but we're told the number may grow as the investigation into the attack continues. NBC's Julia Ainsley joining us now for more. Julia, thanks for being here. What do we know about the tipping point here? Obviously, this investigation has gone on for weeks that led to this decision.
Right. It's actually been 41 days since that July 13th assassination attempt on former President Trump. And some are saying that this is too late for the disciplinary actions we're seeing today. These agents have been put on administrative leave. We know there are about a handful of them. That number could grow. And it's because of an interdepartmental review by their Office of Professional Responsibility. There are a number of reviews going into exactly what happened on that day and why the agency wasn't better prepared. And we understand from the acting director that they were not going to wait until the conclusion of that investigation to take action against individual agents if it was found that they violated the policy of the Secret Service. The big question in all of this, as they've been investigating, is why was the Secret Service not responsible for the roof where that gunman ultimately took aim at Trump? And why did they leave that outside of the security perimeter to local law enforcement? And if they did decide to leave that to local law enforcement, why wasn't their communication better? Because as we know, the locals knew for some time, about 45 minutes, that there was a suspicious person. And it took right up until the end, right after Trump took the stage, that Secret Service knew that there was a threat and that this person was on the roof.
So questions about some of the delegations of tasks there for the event. But also, I mean, have we heard from Trump world yet? We know that the former president has been vocally supportive of the Secret Service. Has he responded to what happened today?
We haven't heard from Trump himself yet, no, not on this in particular, but we did hear from Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, who said that today's decision to place multiple agents on leave is the agency's first step toward accountability, but it comes 41 days after the attempt on President Trump's life, and it's nowhere near enough. So this is not the end of calls that we're going to continue to hear from Republicans and people in Congress to try to get to the bottom of what happened here and to hold more people responsible.
And speaking of accountability, Julia, I know it's early, but what are the odds these agents will ultimately be brought back on duty after all of this?
It's hard to see how they would ultimately come back. At this point, we don't know if they're on leave with or without pay, but it was a disciplinary action. That's our understanding. All
right, Julia Ainsley with developing news there from Washington. Thank you so much. Well, staying in D.C., the Justice Department today accusing a major real estate software company of an illegal pricing scheme to help landlords hike up your rental prices. The DOJ lawsuit alleges that the company, RealPage, violated antitrust laws through an algorithm that landlords use to get recommended rental prices for apartments. In a statement, RealPage said that the DOJ's claims were, quote, devoid of merit and will do nothing to make housing more affordable. A lot to digest here. Ken Delanian joining us now. Ken, the use of data to help property managers set their rents, that's not new. It's not necessarily illegal. But what makes this situation different?
Well, Sam, the Justice Department says this was classic price fixing. You know, they filed this lawsuit under the Sherman Act of 1890, which conjures up visions of men in frock coats sitting in smoke-filled rooms, you know, fixing prices. But what the Justice Department is saying is this is the modern-day version of that, using data and algorithms. That this company took in proprietary data from many, many landlords across the country and used it to set prices. And this lawsuit is replete with really damning quotes from both company executives and customers. One customer said, "I love this product because it's classic price fixing." And there are a lot of quotes from executives of the company saying, look, a rising tide lifts all boats. We want to make sure everybody's making a lot of money here. Why should we compete against one another? Well, that's against the law. And the Justice Department is now bringing this lawsuit. They didn't talk about damages today because first they have to establish liability, Sam.
If there is proof, or it is ultimately determined, Ken, that there was some sort of conspiracy going on here, is there a likelihood that, you know, the average renter in fill-in-the-blank big city might see a difference in their rent? And then also, as far as the lawsuit is concerned and targeting, or apparently targeting these antitrust issues, is it fair to say we're seeing more of a preponderance of that from the DOJ?
Absolutely. But for your first question, exactly what the Justice Department hopes is that this will have an effect on rent. They say that this collusion, price fixing, artificially inflated rents. But in terms of the broader issue, you know, it's not really that well known, but the Biden administration has really taken a much different, much more aggressive stance on antitrust issues. President Biden has really handed over this issue to the left wing of the Democratic Party, which has been very aggressive. Certainly more aggressive than any Republican president, but also more aggressive than the Obama administration, the Clinton administration. They have lawsuits against some of the biggest and biggest business success stories in the United States: Amazon, Meta, Live Nation, the ticket company. So they are really going after these companies and leaning forward on antitrust. It's controversial. There's conservatives who say they're going too far, but they make no apologies. They say they're battling on behalf of consumers. Sam.
Do you get the impression, Ken, that housing specifically is of the utmost importance to this administration when it comes to consumer advocacy?
They certainly made that point today. The Attorney General and others speaking to reporters that, look, this affects millions of Americans who are living in rental apartments and the rents are rising, and landlords shouldn't be able to collude and fix prices, is what they're saying, Sam.
Yeah, something that we can all relate to, the high price of rent. Ken Delanian, thank you so much. We move overseas now to a Russian penal colony in a wild situation that unfolded this morning. 4 knife-wielding prisoners that Russian officials say are linked to ISIS killed multiple people and seized hostages. Russian security forces stormed the prison, eventually killing the prisoners and freeing the hostages that they had taken during the attack. Aaron McLaughlin reports from Kharkiv, Ukraine.
Hey there, Sam. We saw a really bloody scene play out at a penal colony inside the Volgograd region to the south of Russia. That penal colony including some 1,200 inmates. According to Russian officials earlier today, 4 of the inmates claiming to be Islamist militants carried out this gruesome and bloody knife attack, taking some 12 individuals inside the penal colony hostage, including 8 employees, prison guards, and 4 inmates, killing at least 4 of them before being shot and killed by Russian snipers. We understand from Russian officials that President Putin was briefed on the attack today, and this comes as an increase of Islamist attacks has been noted in Russia. Back in June, there was another prison attack linked to ISIS at a detention center in the Rostov region. Special forces killing 6 inmates who had taken hostages. That situation, of course, now also under control. And then back in March, there was an extraordinarily bloody terrorist attack, ISIS claiming responsibility for killing more than 140 individuals inside a concert hall in Moscow. And of course, all of this is happening with the backdrop of an ongoing war with Ukraine. We've seen a number of attacks from Ukrainian military inside of Russia this week, including an attack, a drone attack, hitting a number of sites, including the largest drone attack ever launched on Moscow. We also saw a ferry attack. The main ferry terminal connecting Russia with Crimea was also attacked. And then, of course, that ongoing Ukrainian incursion into Russia, claiming Russian soil, which President Zelensky says he wants to create a buffer zone. All of this creating a pretty bleak picture for Russian President Vladimir Putin, and there's no relief in sight. Sam?
Relief from that or from bloodshed. Aaron, thank you so much for that report. Later in the show, we move out of this world to two astronauts who are still stuck in space, set to find out if they're going to get to come home this year or not. And thousands of carrots making for a record-breaking discovery. We are most certainly not talking about vegetables. That is coming up in the 5 Things. Welcome back. One country says that they have figured out how to turn the moon's soil into water. That's later in the 5 Things. But first, in other space-related news, a pair of astronauts who have been stuck on the International Space Station for nearly 3 months could be, and I emphasize could be, one step closer to coming home. NASA is expected to decide tomorrow when and how Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams can begin their return mission. Remember that the pair flew to the station on the first crewed test flight of Boeing Starliner. That was back in early June for what was supposed to be just a 10-day journey. So much for that. After a series of technical problems, they've been stuck there ever since. NBC's Marissa Parra has been following all of this for us. Marissa, great to see you, as always. I have to imagine, Marissa, this is not exactly how Boeing had it drawn up. What are the main problems that have been holding this return mission back so far? And what could we hear from NASA about that tomorrow?
Well, Sam, it's good to see you as well. I'm keeping your seat warm for you, your old seat back here in Miami. But good to see you, especially because this is potentially going to be a major announcement made tomorrow, the one that we have been waiting weeks and weeks for. And of course, Butch and Sonny probably are waiting to find out when and how exactly they're coming back home. So as you just recounted, they launched into space at the International Space Station on Boeing Starliner. But the big question is how and when are they coming back home? And is it going to be on Boeing Starliner or not? And so since this launched at the start of June, 2 main things have been the point of focus here. There were helium leaks, but most importantly, most critically, those thrusters. So that is what is responsible for essentially steering this ship in the right direction on their return. And so that has been the biggest point of concern. And so what they've been doing, and they collectively, being NASA, all these scientists, they've been collecting data. And in different ways, they've been trying to assess, essentially, making sure that this is safe to fly these 2 astronauts back home on. And so they've been doing all kinds of ground testing. They've been doing that in the western part of the United States. They've been asking scientists who have worked with similar types of system and equipment to get a sense of exactly that, Sam, which is whether or not this is safe to bring those 2 astronauts home on.
So you've beautifully laid out the problems. I guess the next question, Marissa, is what are some of the potential return scenarios that NASA is looking at, and how much longer realistically could this take?
And that answer depends on how they're bringing back those 2 astronauts, Sam. So the 2 biggest scenarios here, as we kind of alluded to, are they going to go back home on Boeing Starliner? Because if so, then that would be much sooner than the alternate scenario, which is the one that naturally you would expect Boeing doesn't want, which is that these 2 astronauts would be going back home on the rival SpaceX. And that would be potentially in February. So for a lot of reasons, not ideal. But you'll notice that in the last few press conferences, Boeing has not been a part of those press conferences. It has been NASA. And I think that there is some messaging there to be said that NASA is trying to make it very clear that this is their decision. And this is all boiled down to safety, Sam. And so the reason that this has taken as long as it has is because they want to make sure they're looking at every piece of critical data so that they can feel very confident that whatever their answer is, it is because of safety and safety alone. But when we talk about how long they could be up there, February is because SpaceX, that is an already separately, that was already planned, if you will. And so they weren't supposed to, the crew that's going up on SpaceX, which is supposed to launch relatively soon, they're supposed to be at the International Space Station until February. And so the idea being Butch and Sunny would essentially hitch a ride back home with them. But keep in mind, those Boeing Starliner astronaut spacesuits are not compatible with SpaceX. So they would have to get new spacesuits commissioned and made just for them because they're tailor-made. It doesn't come in just a size small, medium, large. Which, you know, this is all part of the equation. And at the end of the day, Sam, one thing we know, NASA, the head of NASA, if you will, Bill Nelson, he's going to be leading the press conference tomorrow, which is also major. And whatever they decide, it is because of safety. And that's another reason they've taken as long as they have.
Yeah, you know that NASA's not going to take any chances, and I just hope for Butch and Sunny that they are able to wash their non-spacesuit clothes. I know inquiring minds want to know exactly how that's working, but those poor folks still up there are going to be safe. Marissa,
Yes.
Thank you so much for that report. Appreciate it. All right, let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks that you should know about tonight. Number 1, the former Florida sheriff's deputy who shot and killed a U.S. senior airman getting charged with manslaughter today. Now, you'll recall the deputy was responding to a call at an apartment complex in May. Senior Airman Roger Fortson opened up his door. He was holding a gun, but it was pointed at the ground, and this is corroborated by body camera video. The deputy then shot Fortson multiple times a split second later. He did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Number 2, Ronda Rousey apologizing for sharing a Sandy Hook conspiracy theory on Twitter over 10 years ago, calling it, quote, the single most regrettable decision of my life. Number 3, officials say that at least 2 people are dead after a home explosion in Missouri. You can see the house destroyed. Neighbors say that it was so strong, their doors were also blown open by the explosion. Fire officials right now still investigating. Number 4, Chinese scientists say they discovered a new method of producing large amounts of water using lunar soil brought back from a 2020 expedition. That is according to state media. The minerals in this soil apparently have a lot of hydrogen, which can ultimately produce water vapor. And number 5, the biggest diamond we have seen in over a century has been found in a mine in Botswana. Look at the size of that thing. It's basically that gentleman's hand. Nearly 2,500 carats and weighs around 1 pound. No word yet on how much it's worth or how it might be sold, what it might go for, but sources tell us it's going to be a lot. Voters right now are reacting to Vice President Kamala Harris's big speech at the DNC last night, a huge test for her in this super close race as she tries to win over folks who haven't decided who they're going to choose in November. NBC's Yasmin Vasugian watched Harris's speech with a group of voters in Dearborn, Michigan, all of them usually voting Democratic, but this year they're split mostly because of the Israel-Hamas war. Let's bring in Yasmin now to get some more background on this. And, you know, Yasmin, were they persuaded by the vice president's speech and specifically her urgent call for a ceasefire and to return the hostages?
Yes and no. It's fairly complicated, which is kind of how Michigan votes, which is complicated, certainly a swing state and a state that Kamala Harris's team is focusing on in the run up to November. The woman in the front, Sam, as we were looking at that picture, Sherry, she is committed. She is voting for Kamala Harris as president of the United States, as the next president of the United States come November. She was going to vote for Joe Biden, by the way, as well. The other 4 voted uncommitted in the Michigan primary. They are still uncommitted now. There was one issue in which they all agreed on, and that was reproductive rights. It was the threat that a Trump presidency can pose to further degrading reproductive rights in this country. Beyond that, they wanted to hear more about policies from the vice president in her stump speech last night, in her acceptance speech, I should say, from last night, more specifics. And they wanted her to kind of cut her own pathway away from President Biden, despite acknowledging the fact that she is in a precarious position being his vice president. And then there was the issue of Gaza and those uncommitted voters feeling unsatisfied, yet some feeling optimistic about what she had to say, that she still had the possibility of winning their vote. Let's take a listen, Sam, to some of what they had to say, and then we'll talk on the other side.
To me, a woman's reproductive freedom is, and when she loses that, she's lost her power. It's the power to make decisions about their lives, you know, and so it's taking power away from women to take away that freedom of choice, and it doesn't surprise me that those things are part of a plan.
one thing that we did hear a lot tonight was, why Trump is a horrible president, why we got to prevent Trump from, becoming president again. We heard a lot of that. And again, a lot of that is real. I think one thing that I would have loved to, probably hear a little bit more is like her plans.
So at this point, the threats that she kind of laid out in the lead up, right, when it comes to a Trump 2.0, when it comes to the lack of guardrails, when it comes to the possibility of a nationwide ban on abortion, when it comes to what this country could look like under a Trump presidency, all of that to you still is not necessarily enough yet for you to decide whether or not you were going to vote for her.
It's not enough for me to decide whether or not I'm going to vote for her. She has 70-something days left to go to convince people, especially in swing states, as to why she's the best candidate. If she, wants to talk about moving away from cynicism and wants to move into a new era, she has to differentiate herself from Biden.
I didn't hear dreaming big. I heard why so much of the argument is about why we don't want Trump, and that might just be what's realistic. But I want someone who's going to go in and be like, this is what I dream of for our country, and this is what I think we could build if I win. I really want to hear something positive and like, what are we building toward?
So we're going to play some more sound, Sam, in the next hour, specifically talking about how Kamala Harris, the vice president, addressed the Israel-Gaza war, which I think obviously is very interesting considering the people that we were talking to. But again, it's this idea of wanting to be inspired, right? And I think one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation that I had last night was some of these voters that I'd spoken to back during the Michigan primary were saying, no way, no how, I am not pulling the lever for Joe Biden. There was a possibility among some of those uncommitted voters that I was speaking to that they could, in fact, come to her side, right, if she sold them the goods that they wanted to hear, specifically when it came to the Israel-Gaza war, which, again, we're going to learn more about in the next hour. But there was a lot of unity over some of the things that she talked about when she talked specifically, again, about reproductive rights, as they mentioned. But wanting to feel inspired, I heard that a lot as well, wanting to feel like this is real change, right? When they saw the change from Biden saying it's going to Kamala Harris, right, I'm not running for re-election, they felt reinvigorated, and they want to feel that coming from Kamala Harris as well, Sam.
And Yasmin, I know you're going to give us more of a debrief on some of these issues in an hour, but I'm just curious, like, of all the topics that you just mentioned, was the war in Gaza overwhelmingly the most important one or one of several important topics?
So amongst the 4 uncommitted voters, it was the most important topic. Reproductive rights, I would say, is number 2. And I think, for Democrats watching right now, for folks that are stumping for Kamala Harris, I mean, that is a real rally cry, reproductive rights, right? I saw real unity amongst the voters that I spoke to when it came to reproductive rights for women and the damage that Donald Trump could do. And that's why I kind of keep reiterating it, because I heard so much about it and reactions from them during the speech as Kamala Harris was addressing it. But yes, in this city, in Dearborn, Michigan, predominantly Arab, Muslim American voters here, Gaza, Israel is their number 1 issue, Sam.
Yeah, really insightful, and looking forward to talking to you again pretty soon here. Yasmin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.
We're going to shift gears right now and take you down south where millions are under heat alerts, not surprisingly right now. It is that time of year, mostly spanning this area. Look at that chunk right there across the country's midsection. You certainly see Oklahoma and Texas bearing the brunt of this. Many cities, major cities, though, also really feeling the heat, quite literally. Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, with potentially record-setting highs soaring up to 110 degrees today across the region. Many of us, I think, re-traumatized from seeing those long streaks last summer. Meteorologist Bill Cairns joining me now with more. And Bill, bring us up to speed. Who's getting the worst of this heat right now?
Sam, the problem with this is that all summer long it had been so hot everywhere. We're all kind of in the same boat. But, like, we've had a big break from summer in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, a lot of the East Coast for that matter. but Texas is just still roasting. And then this weekend, the whole West Coast is going to be like dealing with like late fall conditions, even snow in the mountains of California, of all things. So here's the temperature map currently in Texas. And what jumps out at you immediately is Vernon, Texas is 114. That's like a Phoenix and Las Vegas hot temperature. Other areas, Dallas is 102, Childress is 111. We're at Elk City 109, so Oklahoma's very hot. This was hot enough in Vernon that I had to look up what the all-time hottest temperature record was in Texas. It was back in 1994, and that was 120. So we're 6 degrees away from that, but still, it just gives you an idea. Exceptionally hot. The one thing, though, is it's not humid in West Texas. It actually feels lower than the actual temperature because it's really dry, kind of that dry heat scenario. But when we get over here to Dallas, it feels like 111. Comanche feels like 117. So this is where the humidity is mixing in with those temperatures. Obviously, for those reasons, we're under those extreme heat warnings. Advisories will spread northwards as we go throughout the weekend. As the heat begins to spread and head to the north, we'll be in the hundreds in areas like Omaha and northwards. Rapid City could hit 100 degrees. We obviously still very hot in areas of Texas. We're going to warm it up this weekend. But look at California. I mean, look at areas of the Northwest. We're going to struggle in Reno to get into the 60s. And at night, we're probably going to be in the 40s with like a cold, chilly rain. All over the weekend on Sunday, it continues to spread that warmth. St. Louis, 94. There's that 100 in Omaha, Sam, on Sunday. And the East Coast is warming up, too, slowly. That humidity is going to creep back up after we've had our summer break.
Quite the contrast there. I will say 2 words you did not say, which makes me feel a lot better. Nothing about tropical developments. So let's keep.
Not at all. Knock on wood somewhere. But we're at the peak of the season. And if I'm not talking about it, it's amazing.
Hopefully I didn't just ruin things for everyone. No. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Coming up, how police say a woman vandalized a major Civil War landmark. Plus, the last victim pulled from the wreckage of a billionaire super yacht. Our latest report from the ground in Sicily. NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day. Because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our bureau teams have done that for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment that we call The Local. A messy train crash in Colorado, leaving several train cars derailed and a fuel spill at the scene. Police in Boulder say that 2 of the train conductors on board are injured and that the cleanup is going to take some time. Officials in the train company are investigating that crash. Out of our Southern Bureau, 5 people hospitalized after a carbon monoxide leak at a Florida high school. School officials say that cafeteria workers started to feel lightheaded and then evacuated the area, leaving hazmat teams to ventilate the rest of the building. 8 people in total were affected. None of them were students, thankfully. The cause of the leak is still unknown. From our Northeast Bureau, Pennsylvania police arresting a woman suspected of vandalism at the historic Gettysburg National Park. You can actually see a message spray painted on a tower there. So the National Park Service says it was able to clean it all up. The suspect now expected to be criminally charged. At this hour, a massive search ongoing in Florida for a man who escaped from ICE custody in West Miami-Dade County, that is right on the edge of the Everglades. Local police, Customs and Border Protection, and the Florida Highway Patrol are all assisting right now in that hunt. The Chrome Detention Center, where the man fled from, is owned and managed by ICE, and it typically houses undocumented migrants scheduled to be deported. Priya Schroeder is joining us now with more. Priya, what details do we know about this man in the search? Because that part of Florida, as we mentioned, has vast woodlands and marsh areas.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And unfortunately, we don't know a lot of details surrounding the circumstances about exactly how this individual escaped. But what we do know is that he escaped custody at around 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So this massive manhunt, as you mentioned, has been going on for almost 48 hours now. There's dramatic video showing that law enforcement agencies are searching for this person from the air. We know that a Miami-Dade Police Department helicopter was deployed, along with another helicopter that's being used for detection purposes from a different law enforcement agency. They also, as you mentioned, one of the challenging things about this search operation is that it's being conducted so close to the Everglades, which is a wetlands ecosystem. So they're actually using some sort of amphibious vehicle to try to traverse traverse, I should say, that land, and also canine dogs. Now, a source has told our NBC affiliate in Miami that this man is 31 years old, but beyond that, we don't know much more information about him. We don't know if he has any sort of criminal record here in the United States, but we can assume that given the fact that he was in this ICE detention facility, that he is going through some sort of deportation proceedings. That facility has about 615 individuals in it. It processes about 10,000 detainees every year. 5,000 of those people, Sam, end up getting deported.
Got it. So if I understand you correctly, Priya, we don't know what violent history may or may not be in this man's background. We do know, however, that he's 31 years old, according to sources, the WTVJ, and that he's on the run right now. How are local residents and business owners responding to all of this?
Well, obviously, Sam, you know, when you see a heightened police presence, that can be very alarming to folks who live close to this detention facility. And we know that this isn't the first time that someone has escaped from this facility. There was an escape that happened as recently as December of last year. That person ended up being apprehended by authorities within 2 days. So there are neighbors that are close to that facility who have expressed their concern. Law enforcement authorities have told folks to stay away from the area because of the heightened police presence. And they said to basically stay away until they're able to find this guy. So as of right now, you know, as I mentioned before, we don't know whether or not he actually is dangerous. But typically in these situations, law enforcement always says that these individuals are desperate, so anything's possible. Sam?
Yeah, some tense hours right now for sure. Priya Sridhar, thank you so much for the very latest. We go now overseas to Italy, where the Italian Coast Guard says that they've recovered the body of the last missing person on that super yacht that sunk off the coast of Sicily. The woman's body found in the wreckage today is that of Hannah Lynch. She is the 18-year-old daughter of British tech magnate Mike Lynch, who was also a victim of this tragedy. Now, you'll recall that more than 20 people were aboard the yacht with the Lynch family when it went down in a freak storm on Monday. Officials say that they believe the ship was struck by a tornado over the water. All 6 who were missing now, those 6 bodies have been found and recovered. 15 others aboard survived. Claudio Lavanga has more from Italy.
The Italian Coast Guard says it has recovered the 7th and final body missing after the Bayesian super yacht sunk in waters just behind me earlier this week. Now, divers have just returned to the shore behind me after searching the sunken vessel, transferring the body into a waiting ambulance. The body is understood to be Hannah Lynch, the 18-year-old daughter of British entrepreneur and tech tycoon Mike Lynch, who was among the other people killed in a tragic accident. Now, an investigation continues into the supposedly unsinkable luxury super yacht, which, according to survivors, sank in a matter of minutes during a freak storm half a mile off Sicily's coast on Monday morning here. Now, questions are being asked as another yacht anchored nearby did not suffer the same fate, and the ship's designer told Italian media that he believes the incident could have been caused by human error. On Wednesday, prosecutors here questioned the captain of the yacht, who is among the survivors, for 2 hours to understand what exactly happened and if anything could have been done to prevent this tragedy. Now, the prosecutor in charge of the investigation is expected to hold a press conference here in Sicily on Saturday morning.
Claudio, thank you so much. Still to come, new details tonight in the case of a Massachusetts woman accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend. Why Karen Reed is now getting ready to go back on trial next. Tonight, the woman accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend is getting ready to go back on trial after a judge declined to throw out 2 charges against her that includes second-degree murder. Karen Reed's 2-month trial ended in July after a judge declared a mistrial. Prosecutors say that Reed backed her SUV into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and left him to die back in 2022. Now, today's decision means the case can move forward to a new trial set for January. NBC's Rahema Ellis has been following the case, and she joins us now. You know, Rahema, we understand it is complicated. There's a trio of charges that are involved here. Why do you think it is that the judge decided to move forward with another case?
Well, because this jury apparently said they were deadlocked, but during the course of the trial and when they came into the courtroom, they did not say exactly which of the 3 charges they were deadlocked on. The defense attorneys say they heard from 5 jurors after the case saying that they could not find this woman absolutely guilty of 2 of the charges. Well, that was not submitted into the record. And as a result of that, the judge today, she put out a ruling. We've got a full screen of it. She says there was no acquittal on any of the charges in the defendant's first trial, and there's no risk of subjecting the defendant to double jeopardy by retrial on the charges. Therefore, the defendant's motion to dismiss is denied. Basically, that's it. They didn't put the information on the record in the court. And so she's saying there's no double jeopardy.
So the defense is arguing it would have been double jeopardy if it were true that the jury actually did believe that second-degree murder was not relevant here, except there's no proof that that's actually the case. And you said that there was no follow-up questions from the defense attorneys afterwards?
Not during the court proceeding. All of these questions came up after the case had been dismissed on a mistrial, and the prosecution determined that it was going to retry Karen Reed on these charges.
So are they planning to appeal then, and what do we know about another trial?
The prosecution absolutely is planning to appeal. Listen, we've got a police officer who was killed here, who died on a stormy night in January just outside of Boston in 2022. So they're not going to let that go. What we do know about a retrial is this. The defense is saying, as far as that denial of the charges, that they disagree about the judge's ruling today, and they intend to vigorously appeal and assert and uphold Karen Reed's rights founded on the foundation of the federal Constitution's double jeopardy clause. But it's all going to be very complicated when they come down to it. This was a very complicated trial involving a lot of different people.
Is this mostly about firsthand accounts? Is there visual evidence of what happened that night? Like, what exactly is on the table here?
What's on the table is the defense is saying Karen Reed was framed, that the police did sloppy police work, that this officer was dropped off at the house of other police officers. They are alleging, they don't say how or why, that somehow he went inside the house and something happened to him there. And he ended up back outside on this stormy night in January in the snow, and that's where he died. That was after Karen Reed had dropped him off and she had nothing to do with. The thing that makes it even messier is when the judge charged the jury, she said there was some evidence that wasn't collected properly. You can consider that in your deliberation.
Wow. There's another layer then to all of this on top of that. Rahima, thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. Well, still ahead, the politics of fashion. What fashion? Yes, and the hidden messages in those fire DNC fits. All of that up next in The Original. Welcome back, and we go to tonight's Original now with in-depth reporting on a topic that we've been watching. And tonight, it's fashion, front and center at the DNC. Politics and fashion have a long history together, this idea that clothing tells part of the story, with women in particular getting both compliments and criticism for what they choose to wear. And this year's DNC was no exception, with a ton of talk about Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama's pantsuits, Ella Emhoff's looks, lots of women in white, and what messages their outfits might be sending. Here's Chloe Malas.
Under the bright lights of the DNC, politics putting glitz and glamour of fashion back in focus.
Whenever you have these moments of high pageantry, the person at the heart of that is always thinking about how they're presenting themselves and how they're using every tool at their disposal, which includes how they look, to communicate what they're trying to say.
Many women on stage communicating their message in white, an apparent nod to the suffrage movement and the historic nature of Kamala Harris's nomination.
The white suit has become this complete political trope. And particularly during the Trump administration, it came to sort of represent a protest statement.
Hillary among those in white this year and back in 2016 during her own presidential run.
It was worn by Nancy Pelosi during her announcement of the impeachment hearings. It was worn by Kamala Harris when she accepted her vice presidential role.
But last night, Harris making a different choice.
I think it's actually symbolically important that it was navy.
Continuing not to focus on identity politics.
You know, they were sort of the outfit of a commander-in-chief. And it also said, you know this look. You've seen it before.
Michelle Obama grabbing headlines of her own with a rousing speech and a fresh take on the pantsuit.
It was sort of a sleeveless jacket with the lapels that had been deconstructed and gave her the appearance almost of like a bandolier, the way that military officers wear. And she talked about the need to fight to get out the vote.
Many eyes also on Ella Emhoff, daughter of the second gentleman Doug Emhoff, who's modeled for major names like Balenciaga, bringing some style spice to the DNC with this Harris Walls camo hat, now sold out on the Harris campaign site. This, of course, isn't the first time prominent women in politics and their families have helped set fashion trends. Melania celebrated for her high fashion sense, embracing more international brands, but also facing criticism. Grabbing headlines for this jacket with the words, "I don't really care, do you?" worn to a visit to a border detention center with children. Michelle Obama sparking a run on J. Crew stores when she revealed she wore the brand, and often using her fashion choices to elevate designers that inspired her and stood for her values. And with power and fashion intrinsically linked, it's often women who face the greatest challenge, for better or worse.
Clothing is like one of the most universal languages, right? You may not read someone's policies, you may not read all their platform papers, but in 5 seconds, you can look at what they wear and you're going to have a thought about it, good or bad.
Chloe Malas, NBC News, New York.
It is not just fashion, but feelings and inspiration. Chloe Malas, our thanks to you for that reporting. Well, that is a wrap for this hour, but coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with another bombshell in the presidential race, although this one had been telegraphed for a few days now. The top third-party candidate effectively out of the race, with RFK Jr. suspending his slim path to the presidency. Now, here's the twist. He's all in on Trump. Why the independent candidate says Donald Trump is the one he wants to win. Also tonight, a massive moment on Wall Street after a new announcement from the Fed that could bring relief to millions of people. Why the head of the country's central bank says the time has come for interest rate relief. Then, do you feel like your rent is getting out of control? How about yes, says everyone? Well, a new federal lawsuit says an algorithm might explain why. Shocking allegations against a software maker that your landlord could be using to exploit you. Plus, breaking news right now out of Germany, what we are hearing in just the last few minutes about a deadly knife attack there. And we're about to learn more about the plan to bring 2 astronauts home so they're not stuck in space for another year. What NASA is planning to do later in the show. Hi there, I'm Sam Brock in for Hallie tonight from New York, and we are starting with that huge shakeup in the 2024 presidential race. Independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he's taken his name off the ballot in battleground states and endorsing former President Trump. Now, you see RFK right there in just the last few hours calling it quits out in Arizona. Kennedy claims that he would have won the election in what he calls, quote, a fair system, but he criticized the Democratic Party, he criticized the media, and describes this decision as the best path forward for his supporters. Take a listen.
I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do.
And that is what he is doing. Kennedy says he's pulling his name off the ballot in 10 battleground states. That includes Arizona, where he'll appear at a rally later tonight. Just this week, RFK actually got enough signatures to get onto Arizona's ballots. Now he says, thanks, I'm good. Take me off. And we have plenty of huge questions about what this might mean with only 74 days left until the final opportunity to make your voice heard in this election, as in, will this give former President Trump a boost in many swing states where he's starting to fall behind Vice President Kamala Harris? We're going to talk about her in just a second. Will he deploy, that being Trump, RFK on the campaign trail? And how will RFK's voters react to all of this? Is it a given they'll just migrate to Donald Trump? Dasha Burns is at the Trump RFK event in Arizona. She joins us now live. Obviously, you've got your ear to the ground there, Dasha. What are you hearing from RFK's voters?
Well, look, Sam, I just spoke to some of them after RFK made that dramatic announcement. And it's interesting. They really do seem to be the folks that are left in his camp following his lead to backing Trump, the majority of the people that I spoke with. Now, remember, this comes as the dynamics of this race have shifted. After Harris took the top of the ticket, RFK's numbers went from somewhere around 9 or 10% to just 4 or 5%, which means a lot of those double hater folks that were looking at RFK as an option, they went over to Harris. And so our experts that we've been talking to say that the people left over in RFK's camp, they are largely Republican leaning. He has high favorability ratings with Republican voters, but negative favorability ratings with Democrats and with independents. So it might not make a huge difference for former President Trump, but a small boost could be a big deal in a race that we expect to be this tight.
Yeah, that's just the point, Dasha. 4 to 5 percentage points could have a massive impact. And also, RFK seemed to be suggesting that he's been offered some kind of a position in a potential Trump administration. We know J.D. Vance pushed back on that idea a couple days ago. But we know that RFK is angled for HHS secretary. We also know that he pushes completely false anti-vaccine conspiracies. So do we have any idea of what RFK might be getting out of an alliance with former President Trump, HHS secretary or otherwise?
Well, look, I've been talking to allies and folks who helped broker this endorsement, these conversations between both campaigns. They've been saying again and again that there was no commitment to any sort of position, but that they aligned on some issues, and they feel that there's a synergy there, and that RFK does want to be involved in some capacity to just have his message, his issues that he cares about, like child health, be at the forefront. Now, I did speak to some of his allies who pointed to Don Jr., saying that he wants to see RFK Jr. in the administration, and former President Trump has said he's open to it. But what that'll look like is still to be determined.
Yeah, we're going to find out exactly if there was an arrangement and what the sort of parameters of that might be. Dasha Burns in a packed Glendale Arena. Thank you so much for that report. Let's go now to Vice President Harris, who in the last 30 minutes just arrived back in Washington from Chicago. In the last hour, we're learning that nearly 29 million people watched her DNC speech on TV alone. That, according to Nielsen data. Our Peter Alexander, late last night, getting the exclusive reaction of Harris, and she was still riding that high. Here is her response in the moment.
Listen, we've got 75 days to go, so maybe for better and for worse, that's the way I am. Like, that was good, and now we got to move on.
Keep on moving on, and she's going to have to do that quickly with only 74 days, basically 2.5 months until the election. And the pressure is tightening as you look at those poll numbers to turn the good vibes into votes, with only a few percentage points difference there on that composite polling. The race right now is a total toss-up. Gabe Gutierrez is at the White House for us tonight. And Gabe, the VP talked a ton about foreign policy in her speech last night, Ukraine, NATO, and of course, the Israel-Hamas war, immigration as well. Does she think that that's a winning conversation on the campaign trail?
Well, Sam, this appears to be a strategy to try and win over some of those swing voters we've been talking about in those battleground states. If you listen to that address yesterday, she talked a lot about national security and another topic that many polls show that former President Trump has a distinct advantage on, and that's immigration. And basically, the Harris campaign is trying to flip the script on those issues. For example, national security, talking about Ukraine, talking about NATO, and really going head on to the Israel-Hamas war, not shying away from any of those topics. That's typically something that Republicans tend to talk more about and Democrats tend to avoid. Not this time. The Harris campaign feels that by putting that front and center, they can win over some of those undecided voters or some of those voters that might be considering voting third party, Sam.
Yeah, and speaking of winning over some of those independent voters, Gabe, you know, we talked to Dasha just a second ago about RFK announcing that he was suspending his campaign today. In a new statement, the Harris-Walz campaign doesn't even mention Kennedy by name, is our understanding, instead calling in people who want to look for a new way forward. What do the numbers say, Gabe, on the impact that this might have on her chances?
Yeah, that's more what I was talking about. The Harris campaign really is trying to go after those third-party voters, those independents. And if you look at an average of national polling, and we can put up there on the screen, you see that since President Biden left this race, you can see right there, actually, for Robert Kennedy Jr., for Latinos, down 9%, Kamala Harris up 12%, and under voters under 30, Robert Kennedy Jr. down 8%, Kamala Harris up 17%. So, Sam, what that tells you is that those voters really seem to have migrated already to Kamala Harris. So it is an open question whether the endorsement of Donald Trump will really make a huge difference, given that a lot of those voters, according to those polls, have already gone to Kamala Harris. Certainly, President Biden dropping out of this race shook it up completely, Sam.
It sure did. And now evidence, as you just showed, that maybe there could be a Kennedy bump for Harris. So we'll have to see where that goes. Gabe, thank you so much for that report tonight. Yeah. Just before we came on the air, Wall Street showing that it's feeling good as the Federal Reserve Chair says it's time to cut interest rates. Here is Jerome Powell at the Fed's annual August summit in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
All right, that was a lot of fancy economic speak. For right now, a lot of optimism over this rate cut. That is the news that economists and investors have been waiting for a while now. And tonight, you see the Dow closing more than 450 points higher at the closing bell. Remember, the Fed had been raising interest rates for months, starting in the spring of 2022. They have raised rates to a level that had not been seen in almost 2 decades. Now, the goal, by making it more expensive to borrow money, they were hoping people would spend less and that inflation would slow down. And for the most part, that theory has worked. Brian Chung joining me now to break this all down. And Brian, obviously, that speech that Powell gave today, really his strongest remarks about things turning a corner economically, but it also suggests that the labor market right now has cooled off too.
Yeah, and this is the challenge, right? You're basically walking a tightrope, and inflation was really high. It was like 9% in the summer of 2022, and it's come down precipitously since then, 2.9% as of the last read covering the month of July. That's pretty solid work there. But the question is, okay, yeah, that was a byproduct of the Federal Reserve making interest rates so high, taking steam out of this economy, which makes activity go down. Inflation comes down. But the question is whether or not unemployment is going to go up now. Because if you have high borrowing costs, at what point do businesses say, you know what, am I going to have to start to lay people off? That's a big question. Again, that's why the Federal Reserve is saying, you know what, maybe we can ease up on interest rates to make sure people don't lose their jobs.
And to be fair, unemployment was historically low there for a period of time.
It's still
it wasn't sustainable forever.
Exactly.
But I would ask from the consumer standpoint, now people are going to hear this. Okay, now we're talking about a quarter point, maybe a half a point percentage drop. I guess we'll find out. What would that depend upon? And then what would the lag time be once they change the Fed funds rate to consumers actually feeling the effects of that?
Yeah, and just to take a quick step back here, I mean, I speak fluent Fed, okay? And it's very rare that you hear a Fed speaker say the time has come. Like, he's saying it directly, we're going to cut interest rates. But to your point, Sam, we don't know the scale and size of that interest rate cut. It could be a quarter of a percentage point. It could be half a percentage point. It's really going to determine or be determined by some new economic data that we're going to get between now and their next meeting, which is scheduled for September 18th. We're going to get one more jobs report, and we're going to get another inflation report. There's going to be very key for determining, all right, what's the size of the cut when it does happen, likely next month.
What is the net impact for someone who, say, wants to buy a home or refinance a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking at a half percentage point cut, what does that mean for those buyers?
Yeah, and by the way, mortgage rates have already come down on the expectation that the Fed is going to cut interest rates. So we've seen almost a full percentage point of a decline just since May in terms of the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, somewhere around 6.5% right now. So home buyers are already benefiting from this. But look, this is going to be big for credit cards as well as auto loan rates, which are a little bit more hinged to immediate Fed policy. That could be a big change come September if they do cut.
Thank you. And for the record, I would never doubt someone in a suit shoot that sharp doesn't speak fluent Fed.
Sir, thank you very much.
Never a doubt in the world. Brian Chung.
Yep.
Thank you, my friend. All right, well, there is new fallout tonight from last month's assassination attempt on former President Trump. NBC News learning that some Secret Service officials have been put on leave for their actions leading up to and also after that day. This according to a source familiar with the decisions, who adds that the special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh field office is among those on leave. His office was responsible for coordinating the security plan leading up to Mr. Trump's rally. Now, we still don't know the exact number of officials on leave, but we're told the number may grow as the investigation into the attack continues. On that note, NBC's Julia Ainsley joining me now from Washington. Julia, look, weeks of investigation here. Is this the Secret Service's way of holding someone accountable?
Yes, well, it's what we have so far that's tangible from this ongoing internal investigation by the Secret Service's Office of Professional Responsibility. They have put, we believe, about 5 agents, could be more, could be growing soon, but on leave from their duties. And we've just learned recently that that actually means they won't be performing their duties. We mentioned the special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh field office, who was in charge for the security plan. He won't be doing the duties that he had before, but they could be doing other things like administrative tasks, costs. It would allow them to continue to be paid. But this is the Secret Service's way of flagging these individuals and basically helping them take some responsibility for their actions while this investigation continues.
Julia, have we heard anything from Trump's campaign about today's decision?
You know, we just did, actually. We just heard from Trump himself on this, who basically is saying this is coming too late. He said, I think it came from the White House. I think he's talking about this decision for these people to be put on leave. We have no evidence this came from the White House. As we've said, it came from their internal investigation. But he said that they've never provided us with the number of people that we should have had. And so Trump is saying that basically it's because of the Biden administration that he doesn't have the security detail that he wants. We know that recently, since the July 13th rally, anytime he's outside, he's been put behind bulletproof glass. So it's clear that Secret Service has made some adjustments to how they protect him since that incident that day.
Yeah, that's interesting. A political response from the former president there. Julia Ainsley with the very latest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Justice Department today accusing a major real estate software company of an illegal pricing scheme to help landlords hike up rental prices. The DOJ lawsuit alleging that company, RealPage, violated antitrust laws through an algorithm that landlords use to get recommended rental prices for apartments. In a statement, RealPage said that the DOJ's claims were, quote, devoid of merit and will do nothing to make housing more affordable. Ken Delanium joining us now with more on this. And Ken, what exactly are the claims being made by DOJ in this lawsuit? And when you hear the words algorithm and cheating, of course, most of us, maybe our eyes glaze over for a second, but this is what's happening here in the 21st century.
Yeah, that's right, Sam. This lawsuit was brought under the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act. And when you think about price fixing, you think about executives getting together in a room. But that's not what was happening here, according to the Justice Department. What they're saying is this company used an algorithm and used artificial intelligence to take in data from landlords about pricing and rent and market conditions, proprietary data. And then they used that to essentially collude and fix prices and allow landlords to charge higher rents than they otherwise would have been able to do. And the lawsuit is replete with quotes from executives saying, look, why should we compete? A rising tide lifts all boats. One of the customers said, I really love you guys because this is classic price fixing. So very damning quotes in the lawsuit. And what the Justice Department officials said is just because it's technology doesn't mean it's not illegal. An algorithm can take the place of human beings and can violate the antitrust laws. That's what they say is happening here.
Ken, do we have any sense of how ubiquitous this software was being deployed, like how many landlords and potential renters that this might impact? And you know, correcting this problem now, could it have a real life impact on renters?
It could, Sam. There were some various figures tossed around. I believe they said it covered around 3 million apartment dwellings in the United States. This is a major vendor to multi-unit landlord apartment buildings. And yes, what the Justice Department hopes is that they stop the price fixing and then rents will go down in some cases because they say that this collusion allowed rents to artificially rise. Whether that happens remains to be seen, but that's what they hope.
3 million apartments is a very large number, you know, and I would also, to state the obvious, and I would also ask Ken, you know, is this just the latest example of the Garland Justice Department filing lawsuits on behalf of trying to protect consumers?
Yeah, it really is, Sam. It's been a remarkable run. The Garland Justice Department has been more aggressive than any in recent history on the antitrust front. They've sued Amazon, Google, Meta, Live Nation, the ticket company, NVIDIA, that AI success story, because they just are leaning forward on the idea that there are a lot of monopolies right now, especially in the tech space, and they are illegal and they are going to court. Now, a lot of conservatives object to this. There's a philosophical difference about how the antitrust laws should be enforced, and they've gone further, this Justice Department has, than even the Obama administration and the Clinton administration on this front. But what they say is that they're protecting consumers, Sam.
It's an age-old problem of antitrust issues. Ken Delanian, thank you so much for that.
You bet.
We go overseas now to a Russian penal colony in a wild situation that unfolded this morning. 4 knife-wielding prisoners that Russian officials say are linked to ISIS killed multiple people and seized hostages. Now, Russian security forces stormed the prison, eventually killing the prisoners and freeing the hostages that they had taken during the attack. Aaron McLaughlin reports from Kharkiv, Ukraine.
Hey there, Sam. We saw a really bloody scene play out at a penal colony inside the Volgograd region to the south of Russia. That penal colony, including some 1,200 inmates. According to Russian officials earlier today, 4 of the inmates claiming to be Islamist militants carried out this gruesome and bloody knife attack, taking some 12 individuals inside the penal colony hostage, including 8 employees, prison guards, and 4 inmates, killing at least 4 of them before being shot and killed by Russian snipers. We understand from Russian officials that President Putin was briefed on the attack today, and this comes as an increase of Islamist attacks has been noted in Russia. Back in June, there was another prison attack linked to ISIS at a detention center in the Rostov region. Special forces killing 6 inmates who had taken hostages. That situation, of course, now also under control. And then back in March, there was an extraordinarily bloody terrorist attack, ISIS claiming responsibility for killing more than 140 individuals inside a concert hall in Moscow. And of course, all of this is happening with the backdrop of an ongoing war with Ukraine. We've seen a number of attacks from Ukrainian military inside of Russia this week, including an attack, a drone attack, hitting a number of sites, including the largest drone attack ever launched on Moscow. We also saw a ferry attack. The main ferry terminal connecting Russia with Crimea was also attacked. And then, of course, that ongoing Ukrainian incursion into Russia, claiming Russian soil, which President Zelensky says he wants to create a buffer zone. All of this creating a pretty bleak picture for Russian President Vladimir Putin, and there's no relief in sight. Sam?
Certainly not. Aaron McLaughlin there from Ukraine. Thank you so much. We take you now down south, where millions are under heat alerts right now, mostly spanning this giant chunk that you're seeing on the map there, which spans Oklahoma and Texas, among other states. Major cities facing the brunt of it. We're talking about the likes of Austin, Dallas, and Oklahoma City, with potentially record-setting highs soaring up to 110 degrees today across the region. Meteorologist Bill Cairns joining me now with more on the record-breaking temperatures that we're seeing, the hot spots, if you will. But it feels like that's a large map that you're looking at, Bill.
Yeah, it's a lot of Texas, a bunch of Oklahoma. And the problem this time of year, you know, it's hot in Texas. It's summer, right? It's supposed to be. But we get the kids back in school in most cases. You got like the after-school practices that are in session now, and it makes things really difficult to be outside, you know, when it feels like 110 in Childress and 113 in Vernon. So, yes, this is what we call dangerous heat. And I'm sure a lot of those activities have been canceled, or maybe they did them before school if they were smart. Comanche is 109. Dallas right now is 102. Oklahoma City is about 97. So it's going to actually get a little bit cooler as we head towards the weekend. Not a lot, just a little bit. We still got about 25 million people. Heat advisory stretched now all the way up into South Dakota, back down through Texas. And as far as the weekend goes, we're split throughout the middle of the country and the west. Total polar opposites. Areas like Reno and Twin Falls and out here to Boise, it's going to feel like the middle of fall. You're going to be like, wait, is summer over? It's going to feel unusually cool and at times rainy. And if you're at the highest of elevations, you will see pictures this weekend of snow in the mountains of California and possibly heading up even into areas of the southern Cascades. In the middle of the country, the heat's still on, not as hot, but still above 100 in many cases here from Texas into Oklahoma. We stretch those hundreds into Omaha by the time we get to Sunday. And looking into next week, not ideal either for all our friends from Nashville to Little Rock, Montgomery, 100 Tuesday, Wednesday. And this isn't even counting the humidity and how the heat index will feel. And it's even warming up on the East Coast, too. So some people had a break, Sam, from our peak summer heat. That's ending in many cases, as we'll see how long summer holds on as we head into September.
So that's good. And I don't want to brag about what it's like in New York right now, but it's essentially perfect fall weather as you're showing all these sections of the country burning up. The burning question right now for everybody else, though, Bill, is when would we be expecting that relief realistically?
Technically, sometimes it doesn't get to about middle of September, maybe end of September. If you're talking the South, it's usually not to the, October. But, we call it false fall. And a lot of people are right in the middle of it right now, Sam, and it's going to end.
The appearance of fall. All right, Bill Cairns with the very latest for us. Thank you so much. Up next, we have some breaking news right now out of Germany, still developing. We're getting reports about a deadly stabbing attack there. New details are pouring in by the minute. We have a reporter at this moment scrambling to try to get you more information about what we know, how many victims there might be, what, if anything, we're learning about the inspiration behind the attack. All of that is coming up right after this break. And welcome back. We have some breaking news that we're following tonight from the White House. A big hire for Vice President Harris and her presidential campaign. Aaron Gilchrist joining me now with details. Aaron, we're understanding right now the Vice President has selected someone to help to lead her potential presidential transition. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we knew coming out of the convention this week that the campaign said that their next task is really just to get to work on making sure that they can win the election in November. And it seems that part of the process, some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that happens with presidential campaigns will get underway next week. We've learned that the vice president has chosen Johannes Abraham to lead her transition team. It's worth noting that a presidential transition team is something that is put in place actually typically long before right now, before this point in the summer. This is something that usually happens in the springtime, and it's just part of the process for being able for a campaign to be able to move from campaign processes to the process of actually taking over an administration. The Trump campaign has also put its transition leadership in place as well. They'll work with the General Services Administration, which has told us, a spokesman told me, that they will offer the campaigns services through the GSA, transition services, next week on Tuesday, and then they'll be able to move forward with starting that process leading into whichever team wins in the fall, Sam.
All right, an important position there selected for Vice President Harris. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. We have more breaking news to get to now. Just coming in, this has been confirmed. 3 people killed, 4 severely injured after a knife attack. This was in western Germany in the city of Solingen. That is according to police. A manhunt happening there right now for the suspect, who police say fled the scene. Local media is reporting that it happened during a festival marking 650 years of that city. Megan Fitzgerald following all of it for us, and she joins us now. Megan, what more do we know?
Sam, good to be with you. Yeah, that's right. This just happening not long ago. Information is still coming in. But as you mentioned, police just confirming to NBC News, 3 people dead, 4 severely injured. As you mentioned, this all happening at a festival. So you can imagine a lot of people out celebrating, as you mentioned, the anniversary of the town, when all of a sudden local media are reporting that someone yielding a knife stabbed multiple people. Local media also saying that the organizer of the festival went on stage to say that emergency workers were fighting for their lives. So again, that's information that NBC News has not yet confirmed. This is still a very ongoing investigation here, and they've asked people to stay away from the downtown area, because we know that this suspect is still on the run. Now, to give you some context here, we know that Solingen is just north of Cologne and about southeast from Dusseldorf. Again, this was a joyous festival where people gathered to celebrate their town's anniversary. And in fact, the mayor is releasing a statement that I want to read for you. The mayor says, "This evening, we are all in shock, horror, and great sadness in Solingen. We all wanted to celebrate our city's anniversary together, and now we have to mourn dead and injured people. It breaks my heart that there was an attack in our city." He goes on to say that he's in tears and, of course, asking for prayers. Sam?
Unspeakable tragedy in Germany tonight. Megan, thank you so much for the very latest on that. Let's move you over now to the 5 things that our team thinks you should know about tonight, starting with number 1, a second former Memphis police officer changing his plea to guilty today in connection to the alleged civil rights violations that ended in the beating death of Tyree Nichols. Prosecutors say that they're going to be asking for a 40-year sentence. Number 2, officials say that at least 2 people are dead after a home explosion in Missouri. The house destroyed. Neighbors say that the blast was so strong, their doors were blown open. Fire officials are still investigating. Number 3, an Amtrak train striking a semi-truck in Florida today, causing that scene you're looking at on your screen, flames just bursting out. Officials say that the truck was trying to cross the tracks when it got hit. Over 80 people were on board the train when it happened. Thankfully, and certainly amazingly, no one was injured. Number 4, Chinese scientists say they discovered a new method of producing large amounts of water using lunar soil brought back from a 2020 expedition. That is according to state media. The minerals in this soil apparently have a lot of hydrogen, which can ultimately produce water vapor. And number 5, the biggest diamond that we have seen in over a century has been found in a mine in Botswana. It is nearly 2,500 carats, weighs about a pound, barely lift that thing up. No word yet on how much it's worth or how it might be sold. Well, a pair of astronauts who have been stuck on the International Space Station for nearly 3 months could be one step closer to coming home, and emphasis on the word could be. NASA is expected to decide tomorrow when and how Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams can actually begin their return mission. Remember, the pair flew to the station on the first crew test. That was the flight of Boeing Starliner back in early June for what was intended to be a 10-day sojourn. But after a series of technical problems, they have been stuck there ever since. That is a matter of months now. NBC's Marissa Parra has been following all of it for us. So, Marissa, break this down. I know you've been digging into the details. What are the main problems that have been holding this return mission back, and what might we actually hear from NASA tomorrow?
Hey, Sam, good to be with you. So it was a series of, there was first the helium leaks that everyone was looking at, and then since then, the biggest problem has been with the thrusters. And so the messaging was, well, they wanted more time to analyze the thrusters while they had the ability to do so, because upon Starliner's re-entry into the atmosphere, the evidence of the issues would burn into space. So now, since then, the big question has been whether or not whether or not they are fully confident that Starliner is safe to bring home those astronauts on. So what we're waiting to find out, and we expect to hear tomorrow, is how and when those 2 astronauts are coming home. So the question is, are they going to come home the way they came up on Boeing Starliner, or are these 2 Boeing Starliner astronauts going to come home on rival SpaceX? And that would mean a much longer stay on the International Space Station. So we're going to hear from the head of NASA tomorrow at 1 p.m., Sam. And a big question, of course, is, again, how long are these astronauts going to be up there?
And certainly NASA employs some of the smartest scientists in the world. So what's the stakes here for the return mission, Marissa?
So there's a lot at stake. The most important, of course, is safety, and that's one of the reasons why they've taken as long as they have. We talked about a 10-day mission, roughly, has now turned into over 70 days. And part of that was they were analyzing data, and they were pouring through the data that was coming from ground tests that were being done in the western part of the United States. They were talking to scientists who have worked with similar parts of these specific thrusters that they're looking at. But then you also separately have public faith in the Boeing name. Of course, we don't have to rehash everything that has been associated with the name Boeing. So it was going to be a big win for them. And if this was a successful mission, because remember, this was a test mission. This is the first crewed test flight for Boeing Starliner. And so there's a lot on the line when it comes to the fate of Boeing Starliner after this. What will happen to Boeing Starliner's future if these 2 astronauts don't come home on Boeing Starliner? That's another big question here. And it's important also for space exploration in general to have some other way other than SpaceX to get American astronauts up to the International Space Station, because right now it's just SpaceX. So, of course, NASA was hoping to have an alternative way. And then on top of everything, we talked about safety being the most important, but the human toll on all of this. Yeah. So I want to take you to what we heard from the chief astronaut from NASA last week on that.
We are humans, and this is hard on crew members and their families, and we take that into account. But again, as professional astronauts, they're prepared for this, and they're doing great.
So, Sam, we know Butch and Sonny are veterans through and through, but Sonny does have a birthday coming up in September, so I'm sure they are just as eager as all of us are to find out when they're coming home, how they're coming home, and is Sonny Williams going to be spending her birthday in space? Yeah. Well, we'll find out tomorrow.
It looks like Sonny has a sunny disposition, but even so, if she's still up there on the ISS in September, we got some problems. Marissa Parra, thank you so much for that report. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Moving out of politics, and voters are now reacting to Vice President Kamala Harris's big speech at the DNC. A huge test for her in this obviously incredibly close race as she tries to win over people who haven't decided who they're going to vote for in November. NBC's Yasmin Vasugian watched Harris's speech with a group of voters in Dearborn, Michigan, all of them typically voting Democratic. But this year, they're split, mostly because of the Israel-Hamas war. Let's Let's bring in Yasmin now for some more information here. I know you were really laying this out earlier, Yasmin. Just obviously there was an urgent call for a ceasefire and return of the hostages from Vice President Harris last night. How did those remarks go over, and how important specifically is that issue in this voting group?
So for these folks, and again, 4 of them uncommitted, 1 of them absolutely committed to voting for Kamala Harris in November. For these folks, there was one key word that was missing from Kamala Harris's speech last night in accepting the nomination, and it was permanent, coming before ceasefire. They wanted to hear the vice president calling for a permanent ceasefire. And I pushed back saying, listen, we all remember Kamala Harris calling for a ceasefire at the anniversary of the walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. The first time, honestly, we were hearing that from the Biden administration. And do you take that into account in trying to understand and decide whether or not you're going to vote for her come November? And they have taken that into account. Hence, one of the reasons why they have felt more optimistic with her running for president now versus President Biden. However, they still feel as if Kamala Harris needs to win their vote in the next 70-plus days until November. Let's take a listen, Sam, to some more of what they had to say about Gaza and Israel being their #1 issue going into this election, and then we'll talk.
I would have liked to have heard more about cost of living.
Okay.
Rising gas prices, rising costs of food. I just think about like some of the kiddos that I work with, and they want to move out at 18, and I'm like, well, you need to get a job and start saving up right now.
I don't want to pass a bill that's endorsed by the Border Patrol. I don't think that's where Democrats need to go. Like, if she gets a Democrat Congress and she wins and all this stuff, that's what she dreams of, is passing that bill. I think that's, I don't know. I don't love that. That made me pretty upset, actually.
We are sending everything that could make our country, fight with all these issues that we're talking about: healthcare, education, student debt. We're sending all of this money to actually destroy life, destroy land, destroy all kinds of life, not just human life, any kind of life. So to me, it is the issue. Like I said, it is the biggest issue. It's an active crime scene. It's an active genocide.
So her saying self-determination for Palestinians, her saying a ceasefire. Yes, she didn't use the word permanent, but she didn't say temporary. She said ceasefire.
But what we've seen, the ceasefire that they've been proposing, the ceasefire that they've been talking about, we need a permanent ceasefire, and we need a permanent ceasefire now. But, one thing I want to mention is, like, Democrats after school shootings are so quick to say, thoughts and prayers are not enough, words are not enough, we need action. For, what's going on in Gaza, we don't need words. We don't need her thoughts or her prayers. We need action.
You are bombing our families with our money, and just one good speech is going to win us over again? I don't think so.
I'm not going to make a decision tonight. I'm not going to make a decision probably tomorrow. But this is something, it's a work in progress.
So Adam, who you just heard from, open to, right? He's the one telling me, essentially, she's got 70 days to make up his vote. Lindsay, to his right, also saying that this is an emotional topic, Sam. It's a tough topic for many of these individuals, and it's personal. And so it certainly is going to be an uphill battle, it seems, for the vice president.
It's interesting you use the word emotional, Yasmin, because you could just hear the pain in their voices as they talked about what's happening in Gaza, and that was pretty evident. Thank you so much for the insightful and the sensitive reporting. Appreciate it. Coming up next, we have wild images of hot lava spewing from a volcano. This is in Iceland. Later, that's coming up in the Global. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our teams around the world have done that for you. Here's a look at what they're watching right now in a segment that we call The Global. In Nepal, at least 27 people have been killed and more than a dozen injured after a bus full of Indian tourists drove off of a highway, crashing into a riverbank. Now, we don't know if people are still in the hospital, but you can see here in this video the roof of the bus was just torn off. Officials say that the rescue operation has been quite difficult so far. Now to Canada, where a workers' union is threatening to strike against a freight railroad company with a lot on the line here, just hours after trains resumed service from a shutdown. It lasted more than a day while workers negotiated a new labor contract with the freight company. Rail workers are demanding better schedules and contract rules for paid time off. And in Iceland, a stunning volcano erupting there, sparing a nearby town in the southwest. Look at that, just lighting up the sky. That eruption set off a series of really strong earthquakes And now that lava appearing to spread across the area. Authorities say they don't expect it to threaten the population, but this is now the 6th eruption just this year. At this hour, a massive search ongoing in Florida for a man who escaped from ICE custody in West Miami-Dade County, that is right on the edge of the Everglades. Local police, Customs and Border Protection, and the Florida Highway Patrol are all assisting right now in that hunt. The Chrome Detention Center, where the man fled from, is owned and managed by ICE, and it typically houses undocumented migrants scheduled to be deported. Priya Schroeder is joining us now with more. Priya, what details do we know about this man in the search? Because that part of Florida, as we mentioned, has vast woodlands and marsh areas.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And unfortunately, we don't know a lot of details surrounding the circumstances about exactly how this individual escaped. But what we do know is that he escaped custody at around 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So this massive manhunt, as you mentioned, has been going on for almost 48 hours now. There's dramatic video showing that law enforcement agencies are searching for this person from the air. We know that a Miami-Dade Police Department helicopter was deployed, along with another helicopter that's being used for detection purposes from a different law enforcement agency. They also, as you mentioned, one of the challenging things about this search operation is that it's being conducted so close to the Everglades, which is a wetlands ecosystem. So they're actually using some sort of amphibious vehicle to try to traverse, I should say, that land, and also canine dogs. Now, a source has told our NBC affiliate in Miami that this man is 31 years old, but beyond that, we don't know much more information about him. We don't know if he has any sort of criminal record here in the United States, but we can assume that given the fact that he was in this ICE detention facility, that he is going through some sort of deportation proceedings. That facility has about 615 individuals in it. It processes about 10,000 detainees every year. 5,000 of those people, Sam, end up getting deported.
Got it. So if I understand you correctly, Priya, we don't know what violent history may or may not be in this man's background. We do know, however, that he's 31 years old, according to sources, the WTVJ, and that he's on the run right now. How are local residents and business owners responding to all of this?
Well, obviously, Sam, you know, when you see a heightened police presence, that can be very alarming to folks who live close to this detention facility. And we know that this isn't the first time that someone has escaped from this facility. There was an escape that happened as recently as December of last year. That person ended up being apprehended by authorities within 2 days. So there are neighbors that are close to that facility who have expressed their concern. Law enforcement authorities have told folks to stay away from the area because of the heightened police presence, and they said to basically stay away until they're able to find this guy. So as of right now, you know, as I mentioned before, we don't know whether or not he actually is dangerous, but typically in these situations, law enforcement always says that these individuals are desperate, so anything's possible. Sam?
Yeah, some tense hours right now for sure. Priya Schroeder, thank you so much for the very latest. We go now overseas to Italy, where the Italian Coast Guard says that they've recovered the body of the last missing person on that super yacht that sunk off the coast of Sicily. The woman's body found in the wreckage today is that of Hannah Lynch. She is the 18-year-old daughter of British tech magnate Mike Lynch, who was also a victim of this tragedy. Now, you'll recall that more than 20 people were aboard the yacht with the Lynch family when it went down in a freak storm on Monday. Officials say that they believe the ship was struck by a tornado over the water. All 6 who were missing now, those 6 bodies have been found and recovered. 15 others aboard survived. Claudio Lavanga has more from Italy.
The Italian Coast Guard says it has recovered the 7th and final body missing after the Bayesian super yacht sank in waters just behind me earlier this week. Now, divers have just returned to the shore behind me after searching the sunken vessel, transferring the body into a waiting ambulance. The body is understood to be Hannah Lynch, the 18-year-old daughter of British entrepreneur and tech tycoon Mike Lynch, who was among the other people killed in a tragic accident. Now, an investigation continues into the supposedly unsinkable luxury super yacht, which, according to survivors, sank in a matter of minutes during a freak storm half a mile off Sicily's coast on Monday morning here. Now, questions are being asked as another yacht anchored nearby did not suffer the same fate, and the ship's designer told Italian media that he believes the incident could have been caused by human error. On Wednesday, prosecutors here questioned the captain of the yacht, who is among the survivors, for 2 hours to understand what exactly happened and if anything could have been done to prevent this tragedy. Now, the prosecutor in charge of the investigation is expected to hold a press conference here in Sicily on Saturday morning.
Claudio, thank you so much. Still to come, new details tonight in the case of a Massachusetts woman accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend. Why Karen Reed is now getting ready to go back on trial next. Tonight, the woman accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend is getting ready to go back on trial after a judge declined to throw out 2 charges against her that includes second-degree murder. Karen Reed's 2-month trial ended in July after a judge declared a mistrial. Prosecutors say that Reed backed her SUV into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and left him to die back in 2022. Now, today's decision means the case can move forward to a new trial set for January. NBC's Rahema Ellis has been following the case, and she joins us now. You know, Rahema, we understand it is complicated. There's a trio of charges that are involved here. Why do you think it is that the judge decided to move forward with another case?
Well, because this jury apparently said they were deadlocked, but during the course of the trial and when they came into the courtroom, they did not say exactly which of the 3 charges they were deadlocked on. The defense attorneys say they heard from 5 jurors after the case saying that they could not find this woman absolutely guilty of 2 of the charges. Well, that was not submitted into the record. And as a result of that, the judge today, she put out a ruling. We've got a full screen of it. She says there was no acquittal on any of the charges in the defendant's first trial, and there's no risk of subjecting the defendant to double jeopardy by retrial on the charges. Therefore, the defendant's motion to dismiss is denied. Basically, that's it. They didn't put the information on the record in the court. And so she's saying there's no double jeopardy.
So the defense is arguing it would have been double jeopardy if it were true that the jury actually did believe that second-degree murder was not relevant here, except there's no proof that that's actually the case. And you said that there was no follow-up questions from the defense attorneys afterwards?
Not during the court proceeding. All of these questions came up after the case had been dismissed on a mistrial, and the prosecution determined that it was going to retry Karen Reed on these charges.
So are they planning to appeal then, and what do we know about another trial?
The prosecution absolutely is planning to appeal. Listen, we've got a police officer who was killed here, who died on a stormy night in January just outside of Boston in 2022. So they're not going to let that go. What we do know about a retrial is this. The defense is saying, as far as that denial of the charges, that they disagree about the judge's ruling today, and they intend to vigorously appeal and assert and uphold Karen Reed's rights founded on the foundation of the federal Constitution's double jeopardy clause. But it's all going to be very complicated when they come down to it. This was a very complicated trial involving a lot of different people.
Is this mostly about first-hand accounts? Is there visual evidence of what happened that night? Like, what exactly is on the table here?
What's on the table is the defense is saying Karen Reed was framed, that the police did sloppy police work, that this officer was dropped off at the house of other police officers. They are alleging, they don't say how or why, that somehow he went inside the house and something happened to him there. And he ended up back outside on this stormy night in January in the snow, and that's where he died. That was after Karen Reed had dropped him off and she had nothing to do with. The thing that makes it even messier is when the judge charged the jury, she said there was some evidence that wasn't collected properly. You can consider that in your deliberation.
Wow. There's another layer then to all of this on top of that. Rahema, thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. Well, still ahead, the politics of fashion. What fashion? Yes, and the hidden messages in those fire DNC fits. All of that up next in The Original. Welcome back, and we go to tonight's Original now with in-depth reporting on a topic that we've been watching. And tonight, it's fashion front and center at the DNC. Politics and fashion have a long history together. This idea that clothing tells part of the story, with women in particular getting both compliments and criticism for what they choose to wear. And this year's DNC was no exception, with a ton of talk about Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama's pantsuits, Ella Emhoff's looks, lots of women in white, and what messages their outfits might be sending. Here's Chloe Malas.
Under the bright lights of the DNC, politics putting glitz and glamour of fashion back in focus.
Whenever you have these moments of high pageantry, the person at the heart of that is always thinking about how they're presenting themselves and how they're using every tool at their disposal, which includes how they look, to communicate what they're trying to say.
Many women on stage communicating their message in white, an apparent nod to the suffrage movement and the historic nature of Kamala Harris's nomination.
The white suit has become this complete political trope. And particularly during the Trump administration, it came to sort of represent a protest statement.
Hillary among those in white this year and back in 2016 during her own presidential run.
It was worn by Nancy Pelosi during her announcement of the impeachment hearings. It was worn by Kamala Harris when she accepted her vice presidential role.
But last night, Harris making a different choice.
I think it's actually symbolically important that it was navy.
Continuing not to focus on identity politics.
You know, they were sort of the outfit of a commander-in-chief. And it also said, you know this look. You've seen it before.
Michelle Obama grabbing headlines of her own with a rousing speech and a fresh take on the pantsuit.
It was sort of a sleeveless jacket with the lapels that had been deconstructed and gave her the appearance almost of like a bandolier, the way that military officers wear. And she talked about the need to fight to get out the vote.
Many eyes also on Ella Emhoff, daughter of the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, who's modeled for major names like Balenciaga, bringing some style spice to the DNC with this Harris Waltz camo hat, now sold out on the Harris campaign site. This, of course, isn't the first time prominent women in politics and their families have helped set fashion trends. Melania celebrated for her high fashion sense, embracing more international brands, but also facing criticism. Grabbing headlines for this jacket with the words, "I don't really care, do you?" worn to a visit to a border detention center with children. Michelle Obama sparking a run on J. Crew stores when she revealed she wore the brand, and often using her fashion choices to elevate designers that inspired her and stood for her values. And with power and fashion intrinsically linked, it's often women who face the greatest challenge, for better or worse.
Clothing is like one of the most universal languages, right? You may not read someone's policies, you may not read all their platform papers, but in 5 seconds, you can look at what they wear and you're going to have a thought about it, good or bad.
Chloe Malas, NBC News, New York.
It is not just fashion, but feelings and inspiration. Chloe Malas, our thanks to you for that reporting. Well, that is a wrap for this hour, but coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.